Chapter 1. The Message That Uninvited Me. My name is Nana May, and this happened to me. The bank alert arrived while I was standing at the kitchen counter, brushing melted butter over the turkey skin. The radio playing soft Christmas songs that suddenly felt too cheerful for the moment that was about to split my life open. I almost ignored the vibration, assuming it was another promotional message, or a reminder about holiday hours, but something made me stop. I wiped my hands on a towel and looked down at my phone. The word stared back at me, calm and cruel. Account access removed. I blinked, read it again, then again, waiting for it to make sense. Removed. Not delayed. Not limited. Removed. My heart thudded, so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I whispered, "That can't be right," as if the phone could hear me and apologize. I refreshed the screen. Nothing changed. The same message sat there, unmoving, like it had always been true and I was the last one to realize it. I stood there longer than I should have, the smell of rosemary and garlic suddenly turning my stomach. For 32 years, I had handled the finances alongside my husband, not because I controlled him, but because we were a team. Or at least that's what I believed. I told myself it must be a bank error. Christmas Eve was the worst time for systems to fail. I didn't want to worry Tom yet. I didn't want to sound dramatic. I placed the phone face down and forced myself to keep cooking, but my hands shook so badly that I had to grip the counter to steady myself. That's when the second vibration came, sharper this time, insistent, like it demanded my attention whether I was ready or not. It was the family WhatsApp group chat. I hadn't opened it all day. Usually it was just noise, recipes, jokes, photos that meant nothing. But this time my chest tightened before I even tapped the notification. The screen loaded slowly, cruelly slowly, and then the image appeared. My living room, my couch, my Christmas decorations. And standing there, smiling like she belonged, was Tom's ex-wife. Beside her was my husband, and sitting between them was my son, laughing, relaxed, comfortable. Under the photo, someone had written, "Can't wait for Christmas dinner tomorrow," with little red hearts. I felt the floor drop out from under me. My first thought was small and embarrassing. Why wasn't I in the picture? Then the rest of it hit me. She was coming to Christmas dinner, in my home, and I was finding out through a group chat like a distant relative who didn't matter enough for a phone call. Messages kept rolling in. Smiling emojis. Plans about dessert. No one asked if I was okay. No one tagged me. No one said my name. I scrolled up, my fingers numb, and realized this conversation had been going on for hours. Decisions had been made. Invitations extended. All without me. It felt like watching my own life through a window. Unable to knock. Unable to be heard. I whispered, "When did this happen?" But there was no one to answer. Then a private message popped up from my daughter-in-law, Rachel. "Hey, Nana May. Just wanted to let you know. Tom's ex will be joining us for Christmas dinner. Hope that's okay. Hope that's okay." I stared at those words until tears burned my eyes. After everything I sacrificed, after every holiday I hosted, every argument I swallowed, every moment I stayed quiet to keep the peace. Hope that's okay. I typed a response, deleted it. Typed again, deleted that too. I didn't want to sound angry. I didn't want to sound weak. Finally, I wrote, "I wish someone had told me sooner." The typing dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Oh, we thought Tom mentioned it," she replied. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly, quietly, like a fault line shifting deep underground. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Tom walking into the kitchen, smiling, holding wrapping paper like this was just another perfect holiday evening. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, but I didn't move. "Tom," I said softly, holding up my phone, "why is your ex coming to Christmas dinner?" His smile froze for half a second. He sighed, already annoyed. "It just came up," he said. "Came up?" I repeated. "In our house." He waved it off. "Don't start, Nana May. It's Christmas." I told him that was exactly why I was asking. He looked away, and that's when I knew this wasn't new. This had been decided. She didn't have anywhere else to go, he said. And she wanted to see our son. Our son. As if I wasn't his mother. As if I hadn't raised him. as if I didn't deserve to know. I told Tom I wished he had talked to me first. He leaned in and whispered, "Please don't make this awkward. Rachel's already stressed." Rachel, not me. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Tom slept beside me, peaceful, unbothered, like a man who had already moved me out of the center of his life. My phone lit up again and again with group chat messages, laughter, plans, excitement. I stayed silent. Then just before midnight, an email notification appeared. Digital will update, confirmation required. My heart began to race. I hadn't updated any will. I opened it with shaking hands. This notice confirms recent changes to shared assets and beneficiaries. Shared assets, beneficiaries. I turned slowly to look at my husband sleeping beside me and felt the weight of a truth I wasn't ready to face settle into my chest. In the quiet glow of Christmas lights, with my place in the family quietly rewritten without my consent, one question echoed over and over in my mind. What else had they decided without me? My name is Nana May, and I wish I could say the morning brought clarity, but it didn't. It brought silence, the kind that presses on your chest until breathing feels like work. I woke before the alarm, before the sun, lying stiff beside Tom as he slept, his back turned toward me like a decision already made. The email from the night before still glowed in my mind, every word carved into me. Shared assets, beneficiaries. I didn't touch my phone. I didn't want to see what else had changed while I was asleep. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember when my marriage had shifted from partnership to permission, when my voice had become something that needed to be managed rather than heard. Downstairs, the house was too neat, too prepared, like it was waiting for guests who didn't include me. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table without drinking it, listening to the refrigerator hum. I told myself not to cry. I had always believed that if I stayed calm, stayed kind, things would resolve themselves. That belief had carried me through decades of marriage, motherhood, compromise. But that morning, calm felt like surrender. My phone buzzed again. Another message in the family group chat. A voice note this time. I pressed play before I could stop myself. It was my son's voice, cheerful and relaxed, explaining what time everyone should arrive, who was bringing what, and casually mentioning, "Mom, you can just do what you usually do. Just do what I usually do. Cook, clean, smile, make space." That's when the first tear finally fell into my untouched coffee. Tom came down shortly after, acting normal, asking if I'd slept well, talking about traffic, and whether like our world wasn't quietly burning. I asked him about the email. His hand paused mid-pour. Just for a moment. "It's nothing," he said. "Just paperwork." I asked what kind of paperwork removed me from accounts and assets without my signature. He sighed like I was exhausting him. "You're overreacting," he said. Overreacting. That word had followed me through my entire marriage, always appearing whenever I asked a question that made him uncomfortable. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I nodded, because that's what I had trained myself to do. But inside, something was waking up. Something tired of being polite. The doorbell camera notification came in around noon. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I checked it out of habit. There she was, standing on my porch, his ex holding a store-bought pie like a peace offering, smiling directly into the camera like she already belonged. I watched the footage 3 times, my chest tightening with each replay. She looked confident, comfortable, like someone who knew she had been invited back into a space that was no longer fully mine. Tom saw her too. "She just wanted to drop this off early," he said quickly, already reaching for his coat. I asked why she needed to come inside. He said it would be rude not to let her. Rude. That word again. Rude to her. Not to me. She walked through my front door like she'd never left, complimenting the decorations, touching things without asking. She hugged Tom, hugged my son when he arrived moments later. When she finally turned to me, her smile softened, practiced, careful. "I hope this isn't awkward," she said. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "I just wish I had known sooner." Her eyes flicked to Tom for half a second. That was all I needed to see. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't accidental. This had been planned. Later, while everyone chatted in the living room, I slipped away to the bedroom and checked my bank app again. Still locked. A customer service message waited in my inbox. Please contact the primary account holder. Primary. My hands went cold. For decades, we had been equals, or so I thought. I called the number anyway. The woman on the line was polite, distant. She asked for verification. I gave it. She paused. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said. You're no longer listed as an authorized user. Authorized. Like a guest. Like a risk. Like someone who needed supervision. That afternoon, I overheard whispers I wasn't meant to hear. Rachel and Tom in the kitchen, voices low. She doesn't need to know everything, Rachel said. It's better this way. Better for who? I stepped back quietly, my heart pounding. That was the moment humiliation settled in. Not loud, not dramatic, just the realization that people I loved were making decisions about my life, as if I were already fading. Dinner that night felt like a performance. I smiled when expected, served food, listened to stories I wasn't part of. When someone joked about modern families, everyone laughed except me. I caught my son's eye once, searching for recognition, for guilt, for something. He looked away. After dessert, as I cleared plates alone, my phone buzzed again. Another email. This one from a legal office. Subject line, property documentation, review required. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew. This wasn't just about Christmas dinner. This was about control. About slowly moving me out of the center of my own life. That night, lying in bed beside Tom, I didn't cry. I stared into the dark and made a quiet decision. I was done staying silent just to keep the peace. If they had changed the rules without telling me, then I would learn them on my own. And whatever I found next, they weren't going to like it. My name is Nana May, and I learned that morning that humiliation doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives as a single vibration in your hand while you're standing in the grocery store, staring at apples you suddenly can't afford. I remember the sound of the cart wheels, the faint holiday music overhead, the way everything felt normal for one last second. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting another family message, another reminder of where I was expected to show up and where I wasn't. Instead, it was my bank. One sentence. Cold. Precise. Account access removed. I stood there too long, holding my phone like it had insulted me personally, rereading it as if the words might rearrange themselves into something kinder. I told myself there had to be a mistake. There are always mistakes. Systems fail. Apps glitch. People press the wrong button. That's what I told myself as I abandoned the cart and walked outside, the cold air slapping my face awake. I sat in my car and tried logging in again. Same result. Tried the savings account. Blocked. The joint account we'd shared since before our son was born gone. My chest tightened, not from panic yet, but from disbelief. I hadn't been warned. I hadn't been asked. I hadn't even been informed. I called Tom. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. That's when the silence stopped feeling accidental. I drove home in a fog, my hands gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary. When I walked through the front door, the house felt different. Smaller. Less mine. The decorations I had put up just days earlier now looked staged, like props in someone else's life. I went straight to the desk where we kept our paperwork, opening drawers I hadn't checked in years because I'd trusted they didn't need checking. The folder labeled estate was gone. Not misplaced. Gone. In its place was an empty space and a faint outline where it had once rested. That absence screamed louder than any argument. Tom came home later than usual. I didn't greet him. I didn't accuse him. I waited. He noticed the silence immediately. What's wrong? He asked, as if he didn't already know. I told him about the bank message. I watched his face carefully. There it was. That flicker. That split second of calculation. It's temporary, he said. We're restructuring some things. I asked why restructuring required removing my access without telling me. He sighed, rubbing his temples. You wouldn't understand all the legal details, he said. Legal. Another word that didn't belong in a marriage unless both people were invited into it. Later that afternoon, The humiliation deepened. My sister-in-law called, cheerful, unaware. So exciting about the new arrangements, she said. I asked what she meant. There was a pause. Then, oh, you didn't know. That sentence again. I didn't know. Everyone else seemed to. She rushed through an explanation about Christmas plans, about Rachel staying longer than expected, about how it was simpler if certain assets were streamlined, simplified, for them. I thanked her and hung up before my voice could break. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just happening to me. It was happening around me. Without me. That evening, the smart doorbell chimed again. Another notification. Rachel, letting herself in with the spare key. My spare key. She waved at the camera like a neighbor, not a guest. When she walked inside, she spoke as if I were already on board. I reorganized the pantry, she said lightly. It made more sense this way. I stood there, frozen, watching someone rearrange my life under the excuse of efficiency. Tom didn't stop her. He thanked her. That thank you landed harder than any insult. Dinner was worse, not because of raised voices, but because of how normal everyone tried to make it feel. My son talked about work. Rachel laughed at stories I wasn't part of. Tom asked if anyone wanted more wine without looking at me. I felt invisible in my own home, like a piece of furniture that had been there so long no one noticed it anymore. At one point, Rachel mentioned the future casually. When we sell, she said, gesturing around. Sell. My fork clinked against the plate. I asked what she meant. She looked surprised. Oh, Tom didn't tell you? Silence. Thick. Heavy. Everyone waited for my reaction. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I asked one question. Sell what? Tom finally looked at me then, his expression tight. We'll talk about it later, he said. Later. Always later. That word had become a weapon. I nodded, because decades of keeping the peace had trained my body to do that even when my heart was breaking. But inside, something shifted. A line crossed. They thought silence meant consent. They were wrong. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table and opened the legal email. Property documents, revised beneficiaries, digital updates. My name appeared less than it used to. Smaller. Footnoted. Conditional. I read until the words blurred. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called a lawyer. Not Tom's. Mine. When the receptionist asked how she could help, my voice was steady. I think my family is trying to erase me, I said. There was a pause. Then, you're not the first, she replied softly. I went to bed knowing something I hadn't known before. This wasn't about Christmas. This was about power. And for the first time, I wasn't going to hand it over quietly. My name is Nana May, and I used to believe secrets had weight, that they were heavy enough to feel, even when no one spoke them out loud. That night, I learned secrets can also be digital, silent, clinical, delivered with a cheerful notification sound that doesn't care who it destroys. I was standing at the sink, rinsing a glass I hadn't used, when my phone lit up again. I almost ignored it. I was tired of messages changing my life without asking permission. But the subject line caught my eye. Your DNA results are ready. I stared at it, confused. My first thought embarrassingly simple. I never ordered a DNA test. I sat down slowly, like my body already knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. The app logo looked familiar. I remember now, months earlier, Rachel had insisted the whole family do one of those ancestry kits for fun. She'd ordered them, passed them out at dinner, laughing about surprises and percentages. I had refused at first. I didn't need an app to tell me who I was. But she pushed, saying it would help future planning, medical records, family history. Tom had encouraged me. It's harmless, he said. So I'd done it. Swabbed my cheek. Sent away a piece of myself without thinking twice. I opened the app with shaking fingers. The screen loaded slowly, cruelly. Then the results appeared. Ethnicity breakdowns first. Nothing shocking. I scrolled. Health markers. Carrier status. Still normal. Then I saw it. A notification banner at the bottom. New close family match found. My breath caught. Close family. Not distant cousin. Not shared ancestry. Close. I tapped it before I could talk myself out of it. A name appeared, one I recognized. Rachel's daughter. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to form the thought that was trying to surface. The app didn't explain itself gently. It didn't ease me in. It simply stated the connection in black and white. Parent-child probability. High. I felt like the floor had shifted under me. That wasn't possible. Rachel's daughter was born years after Tom and Rachel divorced. Years. I counted in my head anyway, doing the math like I could negotiate with time itself. My chest tightened. I closed the app, opened it again. Same result. Still there. Still undeniable. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat there, gripping the edge of the table, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure someone upstairs would hear it. Everything suddenly rearranged itself in my mind. The financial changes, the property discussions, Rachel's confidence, the way Tom avoided my eyes. This wasn't just about the past walking back into our lives. This was about something that had never left. Something that had been quietly protected, hidden, managed. I whispered the question out loud, just to hear it. How long have you been lying to me? Tom came downstairs when he heard the creak of the chair. He froze when he saw my face. I didn't need to say anything. He knew. That's what broke me the most, not the secret itself, but how quickly he recognized that I had finally seen it. Where did you get that? He asked, his voice too controlled. I turned the phone toward him. He didn't look at the screen. He looked at the floor. That was answer enough. I was going to tell you, he said. That sentence, the most meaningless promise in the world. I asked him when. After Christmas? After the house sold? After I was fully removed from everything that made me inconvenient? He didn't answer. He sat down heavily, like a man tired of carrying something he'd never planned to share. He told me it was complicated, that it happened during a break, that he didn't know at first, that by the time he did, it was easier to keep things quiet. Easier. For him. I asked how long Rachel had known. He hesitated. That hesitation burned. Always, he admitted. Always. I felt something crack then, deep and quiet. Not rage. Not hysteria. Just grief. For the years I spent building a family with a man who was maintaining another one in the shadows. For the sacrifices I made thinking they mattered. For the way I defended him, trusted him, stood beside him in rooms where I was being quietly edited out of my own life. Upstairs, I heard movement. Rachel's door opening. I knew she'd heard. She came down slowly, careful, like someone approaching a situation she'd rehearsed. I didn't want you to find out like this, she said. I laughed then. A short, sharp sound that surprised all of us. How did you want me to find out? I asked. She didn't answer. She talked about protection, about stability, about what was best for everyone. I noticed she never said what was best for me. My son came down next, drawn by raised voices. He looked from me to his father to Rachel, confusion written all over his face. What's going on? He asked. No one spoke. I realized then that this secret hadn't just been kept from me. It had been carefully portioned out, given to some and withheld from others. Control disguised as care. I took a breath and said it myself. Your father has another child. The room went still. My son stared at Tom, waiting for denial. It didn't come. That was the humiliation. Not public yet, but intimate. Familial. The kind that stains memories. I watched my son's face change, watched his understanding of his father fracture in real time. Rachel tried to step in, tried to soften it, but it was too late. Truth has a way of ruining the narrative. Later, alone in the bedroom, I stared at my reflection and barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked older, wiser, harder around the eyes. I realized something important in that moment. They had underestimated me. They thought secrecy would weaken me. But clarity does the opposite. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't guessing. I knew exactly what I was dealing with. Before I slept, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from the lawyer I'd contacted earlier. We need to meet immediately, it read. There are documents you haven't seen yet. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. I had a feeling whatever came next would change everything again. And this time I would be ready. My name is Nana May, and the nurse didn't even look sorry when she said it. She stood there with her tablet tucked against her chest, her voice gentle but distant, like someone reading weather updates. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, tapping the screen again. "You're not listed as family anymore." The words hung between us, sterile and sharp, and for a moment I truly wondered if I had misheard her. Hospitals echo. Voices bounce. Surely she couldn't have meant that. Surely a marriage of decades didn't disappear with a few keystrokes. I asked her to check again. She did. Slower this time. Same result. I was standing at the intake desk of the hospital where Tom had been taken earlier that morning after a sudden collapse. Nothing dramatic, they said. Just precautionary tests. But something about the urgency in his doctor's voice had made my hands shake as I grabbed my coat. I hadn't even brushed my hair. I'd driven there on instinct, on habit, on the belief that I was still the person who belonged in moments like this. The nurse handed the tablet back to me. "You'll need to wait in the lobby," she said kindly. "Only listed family are allowed beyond this point." The lobby smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. I sat down slowly, my legs weak, my purse still clutched against my chest like proof of existence. Around me, other families whispered, cried, held hands. I watched a woman sign consent forms for her husband, watched a daughter argue with the doctor, watched a son pace while waiting for updates. All roles I had played. All roles I apparently no longer qualified for. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "We're here. Don't worry. We. Not me." When Tom's doctor finally came out, he looked past me, scanning the room. Rachel stood up immediately. So did my son. The doctor smiled at them. He didn't acknowledge me. Rachel stepped forward, confident, already informed. "Is he stable?" she asked. The doctor nodded and began explaining next steps. Consent. Observation. Monitoring. I stood there listening to another woman speak for my husband while I faded into the background of my own marriage. At one point, the doctor glanced at me. "Are you?" he began. Rachel answered for him. "She's his wife," she said lightly, then added, "but I'm listed on the forms." Listed. Again with that word. I felt heat rise to my face, but I said nothing. Silence had become my armor. Later, when they wheeled Tom past us, his eyes met mine for just a second. Something flickered there. Guilt. Fear. Regret. I wasn't sure which. He reached out slightly, then stopped. Rachel took his hand instead. I left the hospital before anyone asked me to. The air outside felt unreal, like I'd stepped out of a dream I hadn't agreed to enter. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. Another email. This one titled Consent Authorization Update. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it said. I drove home slowly, my mind replaying the nurse's words over and over. "You're not listed as family," as if family were a subscription that could be canceled quietly in the background. At home, I sat at the kitchen table and finally allowed myself to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just tears sliding down my face, dripping onto the wood I'd polished for years. I thought of every holiday, every sacrifice, every quiet compromise I'd made to keep our family intact. I thought of the dinners I cooked while Tom worked late, the nights I stayed up waiting, the excuses I made for him. After everything I sacrificed, this was how it ended? With a tablet screen saying I no longer belonged? My son came home later that evening. He looked shaken, older somehow. He sat across from me and didn't speak at first. Then he asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" I told him the truth. I hadn't known what there was to tell. He nodded slowly, anger and confusion wrestling inside him. "They had me sign something," he admitted. "They said it was just for emergencies." My heart sank. "What did you sign?" I asked softly. He didn't answer right away. That told me everything. That night, I checked the smart doorbell footage again. Rachel returning to the house. Tom's overnight bag already packed. Decisions made without me. I realized something chilling then. This wasn't just about inclusion. It was about replacement. They weren't pushing me out loudly. They were smoothing the transition, making it look natural, reasonable, inevitable. A woman replaced by paperwork. A marriage overwritten by convenience. The next morning, my lawyer called. Her tone was serious. "They've moved faster than I expected," she said. She explained what had been filed. Temporary changes, emergency clauses, loopholes activated under the guise of health concerns. But, she added, they made a mistake. My heart skipped. They assumed you wouldn't look, she said. They assumed you'd stay quiet. I closed my eyes and felt something unfamiliar spread through me. Not hope. Resolve. Before we hung up, she said one more thing. There's a document scheduled to be finalized tomorrow, she said. If it goes through, you lose more than access. You lose standing. Standing. That word mattered. I thanked her and ended the call. Tomorrow. Everything hinged on tomorrow. I went upstairs and opened the closet. I chose clothes carefully. Not soft ones. Not apologetic ones. Something that reminded me who I was before I became convenient. Before silence became my language. I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, I'm still here. And this time I believed it. That night, as I turned off the light, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from an unknown number. One sentence. You shouldn't have seen the hospital forms. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. That wasn't fear I felt anymore. It was war. My name is Nana May, and power doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes folded inside a plain white envelope, slipped halfway under a door, waiting for you to notice it on your way out. I found it early that morning, just as the house was waking up. The paper looked official, heavy, intentional. My name was typed neatly across the front, no return address. For a moment, I simply stared at it, my heart thudding, remembering the message from the unknown number the night before. You shouldn't have seen the hospital forms. That wasn't a warning. It was panic. I sat at the table before opening it, the same table where I'd cried days earlier. This time, my hands were steady. Inside were copies of documents I recognized instantly, older ones, original ones, property records, trust drafts, a version of Tom's digital will dated years back. And there it was, clear as daylight. My name, not footnoted, not conditional, primary, equal, untouched by whatever emergency revisions they'd rushed through recently. Someone had made a mistake, or someone had decided I deserved to know. I didn't yet know which was more dangerous. I read everything twice, then a third time slower. Dates, signatures, witness names. One witness stood out, a former colleague of Tom's, someone no longer loyal, someone who had retired bitterly after being pushed aside the same way I was now being pushed. That was when I understood. Silence doesn't always mean agreement. Sometimes it means someone is watching, waiting for the right moment to speak. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my lawyer. You got it, she said before I could speak. Not a question. A statement. She explained quickly. The emergency changes Tom and Rachel had filed were valid, but only temporarily. They relied on an assumption that I wouldn't contest them, that I wouldn't have access to the originals, that I wouldn't act fast enough. If we filed today, she said, we freeze everything. Freeze. I liked that word. I asked her what that meant for Tom. She paused. It means he can't sell, she said. He can't transfer. And he definitely can't finalize anything without you. By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking, not with fear, but with something close to relief. For the first time in weeks, the ground under my feet felt solid. I showered, dressed, and left the house without leaving a note. Let them wonder. Let them feel the uncertainty I'd been living with. At the lawyer's office, I signed papers calmly, deliberately. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When it was done, she looked at me with quiet respect. They underestimated you, she said. I nodded. Everyone does, I replied. When I got home, the atmosphere had changed. Tom was there, pacing. Rachel sat rigid on the couch, her phone clutched too tightly. They looked up when I entered, surprise flashing across their faces. Tom spoke first. We need to talk, he said. I smiled politely. I know, I said. So do you? Rachel tried to speak, but Tom cut her off. What did you do? He asked me. No greeting, no concern, just that question. I set my bag down carefully. I protected myself, I said. His face drained of color. The argument that followed wasn't loud. It was sharp, controlled. Tom accused me of acting behind his back. I reminded him that I'd learned from the best. Rachel said I was making things harder than they needed to be. I asked her harder for who. She didn't answer. My son arrived midway through, tension thickening the room. He looked from face to face, finally seeing what I had been carrying alone. "What's happening?" he asked. This time, I didn't stay silent. "They tried to erase me," I said simply, "and I won't let them." That was the moment the power shifted. I could see it, feel it. Tom's confidence cracked. Rachel's certainty wavered. They were no longer in control of the narrative. They were reacting. Rachel's phone buzzed repeatedly. She ignored it at first, then glanced down and stiffened. "The bank called," she said quietly. "They said the accounts are frozen." I met her eyes. "As they should be," I replied. Silence fell again, but this time it belonged to me. Later, alone in my room, I allowed myself a long breath. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't gloating. I was grieving. Grieving the illusion of the life I thought I had. Power doesn't erase pain. It just gives you room to stand while you feel it. My phone buzzed again. A message from the unknown number. This time, shorter. "We didn't think you'd fight." I typed back before I could second-guess myself. "You should have." That night, as I lay in bed, I knew one thing for certain. This was no longer about Christmas, or money, or even betrayal. This was about dignity, and I was done asking for mine. But I also knew something else. When people realize they're losing control, they get desperate. And desperation makes people dangerous. My name is Nana May, and the most frightening things are often the quiet ones, the ones tucked away where no one expects you to look. I found the document by accident, which is how truths like this usually surface. I wasn't searching for evidence or ammunition. I was looking for the spare keys. The house had become tense since the accounts were frozen. Every conversation clipped, every movement watched. Tom barely spoke to me now, and Rachel stayed mostly in her room, whispering into her phone like someone rehearsing an exit strategy. I opened the study cabinet, the one Tom had started locking, but forgot that I knew the old trick with the hinge, and there it was. A slim folder, newly printed, placed just out of sight. I sat down before opening it. I'd learned to do that. Truth lands harder when you're standing. The pages smelled like fresh ink. Property documents. Sale authorization. My eyes moved quickly, trained now to look for what mattered. Addresses. Values. Dates. Signatures. I reached the signature page and felt my stomach drop. Tom's name. Rachel's. A witness. A notary. And a blank space where mine should have been. Not crossed out. Not amended. Simply absent. It was as if I had never existed. I flipped back through the pages, hoping I'd missed something. A clause. A footnote. Anything. There was nothing. This wasn't an oversight. This was design. They weren't just trying to reduce my role. They were trying to remove me entirely. I laughed then, quietly, not because it was funny, but because the audacity of it took my breath away. After everything I sacrificed, this was their solution. Erase the problem. Rewrite the story. Tom walked in while I was still holding the folder. He stopped short when he saw it in my hands. "You weren't supposed to find that yet," he said automatically. Yeah, that word told me everything. I asked him to sit down. He didn't want to. I asked again. He sat. I placed the folder between us like evidence in a courtroom. "Explain," I said. He rubbed his face, suddenly looking older, smaller. "It was temporary," he said. "Temporary erasure. Temporary theft. Temporary betrayal." I asked him who told him I would agree to this. He didn't answer. Rachel appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. When she saw the folder, her shoulders stiffened. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said. I looked at her calmly. "My name is missing," I replied. "There is no proportion for that." She tried another angle, talking about efficiency, about protecting assets, about how things needed to be streamlined before the end of the year. Streamlined, like I was excess. My son came in last, eyes darting between us. He picked up the folder, scanned it, then looked at his father. "Mom's name isn't here," he said quietly. Tom opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, my son looked at him not as a parent, but as a man capable of calculated harm. "Did you think she wouldn't notice?" he asked. That question landed harder than anything I could have said. The argument spiraled after that. Voices rose. Accusations flew. Rachel accused me of holding the family hostage. Tom accused me of turning our son against him. I said nothing. I watched. I listened. Silence had become my sharpest weapon. When they finally ran out of words, I spoke. You plan to sell my home without my consent, I said. You removed me from my accounts. You erased me from your medical forms. And you expected me to stay quiet. I looked at Tom. When did I stop mattering? No one answered. That was my answer. Later that evening, my lawyer called again. I told her about the document. There was a pause on the line, then a low whistle. That's not just unethical, she said. That's actionable. Actionable. Another word that gave me footing. She explained the implications. Fraud. Intent. Pattern. They didn't just make a mistake, she said. They built a case against themselves. I closed my eyes and felt a strange mix of sadness and vindication. I never wanted to win like this. I just wanted to be respected. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house slowly, touching walls, door frames, the banister I'd polished for years. This place held my life, my memories, my quiet moments and loud ones. The thought of it being sold out from under me felt like a second betrayal layered on top of the first. My phone buzzed again. A message from Rachel this time. We can fix this if you stop pushing. I stared at the words for a long time. Fix this. As if the problem were my resistance, not their deception. I typed back carefully. You should have told the truth from the beginning. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then nothing. I set the phone down and realized something important. They were no longer trying to convince me. They were trying to control the damage. And that meant they were scared. The next morning, an email arrived from the county clerk's office. Subject, sale filing delay. I opened it with a steady hand. The transaction had been flagged. Frozen. Pending investigation. I exhaled slowly, the sound shaky but real. For the first time, the house felt like mine again. Not because I owned it outright, but because I was no longer invisible within it. Still, victory felt incomplete. Something was missing. One more piece. One more truth. I could feel it hovering just out of reach. Secrets don't like being alone. They travel in groups. And I knew deep down that this wasn't the worst of it yet. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the house filled with long shadows, Tom knocked softly on the bedroom door. We need to talk, he said, his voice thinner than before. I didn't answer right away. I knew whatever he was about to say would change things again. I opened the door and waited. My name is Nana May, and there are moments in life when silence becomes heavier than any confession. That night, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Every room carried echoes of conversations that never fully ended, words swallowed before they could become dangerous. Tom stood in the doorway of my bedroom, waiting for permission I no longer felt obligated to give. I stepped aside anyway, not because I owed him access, but because I wanted to hear what fear sounds like when it has nowhere left to hide. He didn't sit at first. He paced. I watched him the way you watch a storm from a distance, aware of its power, but no longer afraid of being swept away. Finally, he stopped and looked at me. Really looked. This has gone too far, he said. I nodded slowly. Yes, I replied. It has. That wasn't the agreement he expected. His jaw tightened. He tried again. Softer this time, talking about pressure, about advisors, about how Rachel had been helping him manage things he could no longer handle alone. He spoke like a man building excuses brick by brick, hoping one of them would hold. I asked him one question. When did you decide I didn't deserve the truth? He opened his mouth, then closed it, the sound catching in his throat. He admitted, finally, that it started small. One form, one signature, one decision made without me because it was easier than explaining. Easier became habit. Habit became strategy. Strategy became betrayal. He said my resistance made everything harder. I told him deception always does. The next morning, I called for a family meeting. No more hallway arguments. No more whispers. If the truth was going to be spoken, it would be spoken in the open. Tom looked uneasy when I said it. Rachel looked offended. My son looked relieved. We sat around the dining table, the same one that had held birthdays and holidays, now bearing the weight of something heavier. I placed the folder in the center, the one with my name missing. The room went quiet. I spoke first, not loudly, not angrily. Calm is unsettling when people expect rage. I listed facts, dates, documents, decisions. I didn't accuse. I didn't insult. I let the truth speak for itself. When I finished, I asked if anyone wanted to correct me. No one did. Rachel finally broke the silence, saying she'd only been trying to help, that Tom was overwhelmed, that I didn't understand how complicated things had become. I looked at her and said, "Complicated doesn't mean secret." My son nodded, eyes never leaving her face. Tom tried to take responsibility then, saying he should have handled it differently. Should have told me sooner. Should have trusted me. Should have. Words that arrived too late. I told him trust isn't a door you knock on after breaking it down. It's something you protect before it shatters. He lowered his head. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I did something they didn't expect. I told them what came next. Legal action. Independent control. Boundaries that would no longer bend to convenience. Rachel reacted first, accusing me of tearing the family apart. I reminded her that families break when honesty leaves, not when it returns. My son spoke then, his voice steady but emotional, saying he'd watched me be dismissed for years, that he was tired of being asked to pretend everything was fine. Hearing him say it out loud felt like a hand on my back, keeping me upright. The meeting ended without resolution, but something had shifted. The truth had been spoken without permission, and it could not be put back. That afternoon, I left the house for the first time without feeling like I was abandoning something. I went for a long walk, letting the cold air clear my head. I thought about all the times I'd stayed quiet to keep peace, not realizing I was trading pieces of myself each time. Peace built on silence is fragile. I understood that now. When I returned, the house felt different, smaller, less certain. Rachel avoided me. Tom retreated into his study. My son helped me make dinner, neither of us talking much, but both aware of the new line drawn between what was acceptable and what was not. Later that night, another message arrived from the unknown number. "You did the right thing." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The right thing had already been done. As I lay in bed, I realized something important. Speaking the truth doesn't end the story. It changes it. There would be consequences, repercussions, attempts to regain control. But I was no longer afraid of that. Fear thrives in silence, and I had finally broken mine. Somewhere in the house, a door closed softly. Not a slam, not a fight, just an ending. And I knew the next chapter would not be about survival. It would be about reckoning. My name is Nana May, and sometimes the people you least expect become your strongest allies. I had spent weeks walking a tightrope of betrayal, mistrust, and whispered threats. And just when I thought I was alone, someone reached out, not with words of comfort, but with evidence, strategy, and the quiet authority of someone who had been ignored for far too long. It began with a knock on the front door one rainy afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone. The rain had soaked the driveway, and the sky pressed down with a heaviness that mirrored the tension inside the house. I opened the door slowly, half expecting it to be Rachel with another excuse, or Tom with yet another apology I couldn't accept. Instead, I found Eleanor, Tom's former legal assistant, a woman I had seen around but never truly noticed, standing there with a manila envelope clutched under her arm. Her eyes were serious, almost wary, and she said only, "I think you need to see this." I led her inside, letting her sit at the table while I poured tea without a word. The envelope lay between us, untouched for a long moment as we studied each other. Eleanor had been a silent observer for years, quietly cataloging the family's legal patterns, the way decisions were always made to exclude me subtly, strategically. She had watched me bend, stay quiet, absorb betrayal, and now she had proof. She opened the envelope herself and pulled out documents that made my chest tighten. Contracts, emails, hidden clauses, digital files with timestamps showing who authorized what and when. My name had been erased from far more than just property forms. There were bank authorizations, trust modifications, emergency medical consents, even emails to attorneys instructing them to bypass me. And somewhere, buried in it all, there was one line that made my hands shake. Assume Nana May will not notice. I let that sink in. Years of manipulation, calculated and cruel, designed to push me out quietly, respectfully, politely, like a problem being removed without anyone noticing. I could feel the anger rise, but I held it. Eleanor waited patiently, like she knew that once I processed it, the fire would burn on its own. They underestimated you, she said finally. Her voice was soft, but every word landed like a hammer. And that's their mistake. I nodded slowly, feeling the first spark of a dangerous confidence, one I hadn't allowed myself in years. Power was no longer abstract. It had a name, a folder, and an ally. Over the next few days, Eleanor and I worked quietly, piecing together a strategy that would make every move Tom and Rachel had made transparent undeniable. Every signature, every authorization, every attempt at erasure was documented, cataloged, and ready to counteract. Eleanor had contacts, lawyers, notaries, financial auditors, people who had quietly left the system when corruption and manipulation became routine, now ready to act. We had time, but not much. The Christmas dinner was approaching, and I knew that once everyone gathered under one roof, the tension would be visible, almost explosive. But for the first time, I was not walking into that storm unarmed. When the day arrived, I entered the house deliberately, calmly, dressed in a muted elegance that didn't scream, but commanded attention. Tom and Rachel were already there, arranging decorations and serving appetizers. They both glanced at me, surprise flickering in their eyes, quickly replaced by subtle defensiveness. I greeted my son, who had grown taller since I last noticed, and together we exchanged a look that said everything without words. We were no longer alone. Eleanor followed quietly behind me, her presence unnoticed by most of the family, but crucial. She held herself like someone who knew secrets the rest of the world could not touch. Dinner began with forced pleasantries. Conversations circled, laughter attempted, but tension was a live wire under every smile. Tom tried to dominate the conversation, to remind everyone who ran the household, but Eleanor had already subtly adjusted the seating, documents slipped under plates, text alerts quietly set to ping our phones with confirmation of our prepared evidence. Every time Rachel attempted a jab, Eleanor raised an eyebrow or sent a message that reminded me of our quiet, invisible control. By the time the main course arrived, I realized that power didn't have to be loud. It only had to be undeniable. At one point, Tom excused himself, muttering about a phone call. Rachel leaned slightly toward me, a whisper meant to unsettle. You can't win this. I smiled faintly. I already have, I said softly, letting the words hang in the air. She froze for a second, perhaps realizing that this was no longer about anger or persuasion, but about a factual record, something unmovable. I could feel the energy shift, subtle but unmistakable. I wasn't pleading anymore. I wasn't explaining. I existed in a space they could no longer manipulate. By dessert, the tension had become almost tangible. The family group chat buzzed incessantly, but this time, the notifications were ours to see first. Texts intended to undermine me were documented. Calls meant to confuse me were recorded. And through it all, Eleanor remained calm, her presence a quiet reminder that someone had been watching, waiting, and now ready to act. I realized then that alliances matter more than confrontation. Sometimes the smallest, quietest ally holds more power than the loudest opponent. After dinner, while the rest of the family dispersed to lounges and kitchens, I stayed at the table with Eleanor. She handed me a sealed envelope, one more piece of evidence. This, she said, is the one they never expected you to find. It will change everything if you choose to use it. I took it slowly, savoring the weight of it, the reality that my position, my dignity, was no longer conditional. That night, when I finally went to bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, a sense of quiet, calculated anticipation. This wasn't over, not by far, but for the first time, I wasn't fearing the next move. I was preparing for it. And I knew that by tomorrow, Alliances would start shifting in ways I could only imagine. But now, finally, control was mine to claim. My name is Nana May, and endings rarely arrive quietly. That morning, the house was eerily still, as though it, too, waited for the final act. I woke with a strange calm, knowing that months of tension, betrayal, and silent observation had led to this moment. I dressed carefully, each movement deliberate, like armor, and carried the last envelope Eleanor had given me. It contained the key document, the one that proved, beyond any doubt, that every exclusion, every attempt to erase me from my own family and home, had been illegal, unethical, and deliberate. I arrived at the lawyer's office, my heart steady but my mind racing. The woman who had guided me through these stormy months greeted me with a knowing smile. "Today," she said quietly, "everything changes." I nodded, not out of hope, but because I had already learned that hope is fragile, preparation is not. The hearing room was small, formal, and silent, the kind of place where every word echoes and every expression is magnified. Tom and Rachel were already there, tense, their faces betraying fear beneath the practiced masks of composure. I sat across from them, Eleanor by my side, both of us calm, deliberate, almost untouchable. The lawyer began the proceedings by presenting the documents I had gathered, each piece of evidence more damning than the last. There were emails, text messages, digital files, notarized copies, witness statements, all showing a pattern of intentional exclusion, manipulation, and attempted erasure. As she spoke, I watched Tom's confident posture crumble. His face went pale. Rachel fiddled with her phone, looking desperate for any distraction, but the court's formality left no room for escape. My son watched silently, pride and relief flickering across his face. He had witnessed too much, suffered too long in the middle, and now he finally saw the truth spoken out loud, unaltered, undeniable. The most tense moment came when the lawyer pulled out the final piece of evidence, the one from Eleanor. A contract recently altered that would have completely removed me from all legal and financial responsibilities and rights in the household and family estate. My name had been replaced, erased, rewritten, as though I had never existed. I watched Tom's eyes widen as the lawyer held it up for the judge to see. "This," she said firmly, "was executed without consent and with deliberate intent to exclude the rightful party." Silence followed, heavy, sharp. I realized then that power is quiet until it is undeniable. The judge read through the documents carefully, asking precise questions. My responses were calm, factual, unshakable. Each time the opposition tried to undermine me, Eleanor's presence reminded them that every manipulation had been caught, every lie documented. The room seemed smaller, the air thicker, and I understood that truth carries weight, and when combined with preparation, it can shift everything in an instant. When the lawyer finally concluded, she turned to me and whispered, "Are you ready?" I nodded. I had been ready for months. The final verdict was delivered swiftly. One sentence, heavy with consequence. The original exclusions were nullified, my rights restored, and all attempts at unilateral control or erasure by Tom or Rachel were declared void. I felt a strange release, not of joy, but of clarity. Relief mixed with a deep understanding that respect, once lost, is rarely given without action. The lawyer looked at me and said softly, almost for herself as much as for me, "They underestimated you, and now they know the cost." I nodded, feeling the truth of that statement seep into every part of me. When we left the courthouse, Tom and Rachel were quiet, uncertain. My son walked beside me, offering a small, supportive hand. The house I returned to that afternoon felt different. Not just mine because the law had confirmed it, but mine because I had reclaimed it through courage, strategy, and quiet perseverance. I walked through each room slowly, touching surfaces I had polished for decades, and allowed myself a private sense of victory. Not gloating, not triumph, just acknowledgement that I existed, that I mattered, that my voice could no longer be erased. Later, as evening fell, the house quiet again, I found another note slipped under my bedroom door. It was from Eleanor. "There's more," it said. That was all. Just 2 words. My heart skipped. A bigger secret. Something they had tried to hide from everyone, something that went beyond property, beyond manipulation, beyond betrayal. I knew that the journey wasn't over, that the story had layers even deeper than I had imagined. And yet, for the first time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. I wasn't scared. I was prepared. I sat by the window, looking out at the garden, the sky darkening, and realized something crucial. Power and dignity are not gifts. They are reclaimed, one deliberate step at a time. I thought of all the silent sacrifices, the nights spent holding myself together while pretending to be small, compliant, invisible. That was over. I was visible now. I was present. And I was armed not with anger but with clarity. As I prepared for bed, the phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number, one I had come to respect. You've done well. But the rest will follow. I read it and smiled faintly. Rest will follow. Secrets will be revealed. And I will be here ready. Before closing my eyes, I thought of my son, my home, and the life I had built quietly, persistently, despite those who tried to erase it. The weight of the past months was heavy, but it had taught me something vital. Dignity is non-negotiable. Respect is not optional. And family, while flawed and fragile, can only thrive when truth is allowed to exist openly. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the house, I felt the pulse of a story yet to unfold. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know who it would touch. But I did know one thing. When it came, I would be ready.